Here's TSN hockey insider Pierre LeBrun for his weekly visit with us. And Pierre, the big news off ice this week in the NHL was the Ivan Demidov signing with the Montreal Canadiens. Very cool for the Montreal Canadiens. Just over a week left in the season. So what a lot of people are pointing out is in essentially burning that first year of that entry-level deal, you're making that first year a handful of regular season games and the playoffs. And some people are maybe a bit confused by that. Can you tell us more about the timing of the deal?
Yeah, I mean, it's par for the course for players of this ilk. I mean, you saw a couple of prospects join their teams here late in the year from U.S. college, and this is the similar vein. We can get a special player like this into the fold. You're more than happy as an organization to burn the first year of that entry-level deal. But the reality is, about a week ago, I don't think the Montreal Canadiens knew this was truly a possibility. They hoped, but this really came together quickly on Tuesday. And, you know, there's a number of layers to this, Jay. I mean, number one, my understanding is that Habs GM Kent Hughes, before the KHL playoffs began, reached out to Scott in St. Petersburg and said, hey, if you're eliminated from the playoffs while we still have our season going, is there any chance you would think of releasing Ivan from his contract? But I'm also told that he didn't really get a response. But at least what the Habs did there is they planted the seed, which I think was very important. And remember that Ken Hughes had gone over to Russia in December, met with Ska. I know it was controversial at the time that he did that, but in this particular story, I think it helped in getting the player over here when he did here this week. But the other part of all this is agent Dan Milstein, who I had a chance to speak with on Wednesday, Jay, and he said, listen, he gives Scott a ton of credit because right after the draft last year, Scott wanted to extend Demidov, and the answer was a firm no from the player and from the agent. And obviously that was really brutal news for Scott to receive. And as Milstein said, there are a lot of KHL clubs that would have taken that news and sort of make the player wear it, right? Make him a scapegoat, make his life heck for the entire year and so on. But Milstein says, despite the way things were portrayed this year and the start of the year, certainly not a lot of ice time for the player over there. Milstein says, development-wise, everything went the way that they had hoped in terms of the way the player was treated and the kind of attention he got from the head coach there, which I know the Habs feel the same way. So, you know, I think that behind closed doors, perhaps things were in better shape than what the perception was from the outside, all of which led to this week. And Dan Milstein said it was his plan all along to get his player out of there if he could at the end of the KHL season, but he truly didn't know if he could pull it off with the help of the Habs until Scott was eliminated. I mean, you just don't know until it happens. It's Russia, it's complicated, it's delicate, and it all came together on Tuesday. So, you know, it's a total bonus for the Habs because they didn't think they were getting him until next year, and now they get this very special player for the rest of the season.
It's, as I said on the show yesterday, Pierre, a pretty amazing time to be a Montreal Canadiens fan right now for many, many reasons. And since you and I last spoke, you've written in The Athletic, and I know you've also talked with fellow insiders Chris Johnston and Darren Dreger from the GM's meetings about playoff cap compliance. This is something that so many fans are interested in, as you know, Pierre. I'm sure you've heard from a million of them about it. It's a potential issue in CBA talks between the league and the Players Association. I know you've talked about that too. At the end of the day, Pierre, right now where you sit, do you expect the two sides to be able to come to an agreement on what is obviously a really complex issue?
I'm not ready to say that they will, Jay, but as I reported last week, they absolutely will address it in the CBA extension talks that began last week. That is the league's intention. The league's got a lot of things they want to get to in these CBA talks, but it was confirmed to me that this is something they will tackle with the NHLPA. It's incredible how this issue has really resonated with the hockey fans. And I'll tell you a funny story. I wrote a story recently in The Athletic that was more about injury updates on top players like Matthew Tkachuk and so on. And the first comment in The Athletic beneath the story was, what about the playoff and salary cap and LTIR? Like, it's one of those stories. And of course, we know that this controversy started with Patrick Kane in 2015. Broken collarbone. He's going to be out a while. Oh, he's back for the first game of the playoffs. And of course, Kucherov missing the whole regular season in 21 and coming back, winning a cup with Tampa. Mark Stone in 23 with Vegas. But I think it's important to note that those aren't the only three instances. I mean, smart front offices have maximized the LTI rules to their benefit. The Toronto Maple Leafs, chief among them. Okay, and this doesn't get mentioned enough, but the Leafs are really smart with their cap management. Brandon Pridham. And they have completely exploited the LTR rules within the rules. It's just that it hasn't been the same storyline or headline. Well, let's just say it, because the Leafs haven't won the cup because of it. But Florida's another team that has always been smart with LTIR rules, so on and so on. What I'm saying is there's a desire amongst a lot of teams to tackle this, not just because of the three famous cases, but because this is an area of the CBA that most teams exploit. I don't know, at the end of the day, though, if they can find the right solution. Bill Daly of the NHL has told us in the past, this is a way more complicated answer than all the propositions and solutions that people have given us. You know, Ken Holland and Jim Nill have given the example of, who, you know, let's say your payroll's $100 million, fine, because you added guys at the trade deadline because you have injured players. But come playoffs, your active roster that night has to be salary cap compliant, whoever's playing that night on the ice.
Yeah.
And that's an idea that resonated with a lot of GMs a couple of years ago when it first got thrown on the table. But Bill Daly would say, it's more complicated than that. So I'm not ready to tell you that we're going to get an answer on this, but I do know it's being talked about.
And it's never too early to talk about rosters for the 2026 Olympics. So let's do that. And here's something, Pierre, I'm not sure that everybody knew. Just like with the Four Nations face-off, teams are going to announce their first six in June for the Milan Olympics.
Right.
So that's really exciting, something fun to look forward to. How different do you expect Canada's first four, or first six rather, for the Olympics? How different do you think it'll look compared to the first six at the Four Nations?
Right. Well, I mean, obviously that remains to be seen, but I should mention that when the NHL was at the Olympics in 2010 in Vancouver, in 2014 in Sochi, this was also similar, where countries had to name their original six early and then the rest of their roster later. So it's not new, it's just that they're doing it again.
Yeah.
So by June 15th, each country has to name six players. Listen, obviously with Team Canada, you have the four no-brainers. Connor McDavid, Sidney Crosby, Nathan McKinnon, Cale Makar. Hello, they're already booked. Then after that, it's interesting. Braden Point was part of the original six last year for Four Nations. I don't see why he would lose that spot. He continues to be excellent and consistent, had a good Four Nations, so I would slot him back in if it were me. And then it leaves one spot, which belonged to Brad Marchand a year ago. Brad Marchand may still make this team if he has a great playoff for Florida and has a bounce back here next year. But right now, I think you would agree it's pretty hard to put him in the original six in June if you're Team Canada. So it leaves open a new spot. And the one that I put in when I wrote about this week is Mitch Marner. I think he's earned it. I think he was great at Four Nations. We all know which goal he set up to end the event. To me, Mitch Marner is the guy that I would put in with the other names that I mentioned. I'll tell you one thing that I'm ready to guarantee 100% to you, Jay. Team Canada will not name a goalie as part of those six. Despite Jordan Binnington's heroics in the championship game at Four Nations,
Yes.
I guarantee you that Team Canada will not name a goalie as part of those original six. They'll wait till December 31st to name their goalies. And by the way, that's the other big deadline. New Year's Eve, December 31st, is when all countries have to name the rest of their 25-man Olympic roster.
Pierre, love having you on the show. Love that you take the time to join us every week. Can't wait to talk Olympics pretty much all the way until the Olympics actually happen. So thanks again, buddy, and we'll talk to you next week.
Right on, right on.